On April 29th, 2014, convicted murderer Clayton Lockett was given a lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in accordance with a death sentence which he had been given several years prior. However, this event gained national media attention when during the course of the execution, the injection was botched, resulting in a long and described by many torturous and inhumane death to this convicted felon. Now, the debate that was started as a result of this occurrence was one that's been brought up many times, and that is, should the United States of America continue to have capital punishment, also known as the death penalty, available in its court of law? Now, I'm here to convince you that more or less the answer to this question is no. Now, currently, the United States is on a list with 4 other countries, those being Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and China, as the top 5 countries which legally allow execution of convicted prisoners. And this list consists of 85% of the world's total legally conducted executions. Now, the way the United States stands out in this list is that the United States, unlike these other countries, is supposed to be a constitutional democracy and has a judiciary system wherein the burden of proof lies on the prosecution and not on the defense. And this means that a citizen who is arrested is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That is what our judiciary system stands for. Now, most people would say, if they are for the death penalty, that obviously this makes sense, because we would never want to execute a innocent person legally. So, therefore, only a guilty person of a very heinous act should be executed. However, the problem with that is, since 1978, with the rise of genetic testing and advances in DNA forensics, there have been 314 death row convictions which have been exonerated and overturned as a result of after the trial DNA testing, which has cleared a person who was otherwise found guilty in a court of law. And from this number, which continues to rise, it has been averaged that about 4% of those persons who are convicted of a heinous crime and sentenced to death are in fact innocent persons. And that's just based on the figures that DNA evidence has exonerated, meaning that there is a chance that 1 in 25 people on death row are in fact not guilty of the crimes which they are to be executed for. Now, if that's not enough to make you reconsider this, also consider this. In this country, death sentence is an inherently racial issue. In fact, in many surveys, it has been shown that a person of color is much more likely to be considered or convicted of the death penalty than a white defendant. And this probability goes even higher if the defendant is a person of color and the victim who they stand accused of murdering is white. So, with this being said, it's very hard to believe that this continuing practice is in fact blind to the social issues that this country still faces. Also, when you look into it, people think, well, is it right for a person who is rightfully convicted of a horrible crime to be paid for the rest of their life in a prison? Well, in order to execute a person in this country, it is extremely expensive. In fact, a Washington State Office of Public Defense did a study wherein it found that it averages $1.7 million per convict to give them the death penalty, from a combination of multiple court appearances to include both the criminal and appeals court, as well as their time in prison, which is also typically more expensive than other prisoners because they are death row, as well as then the price to actually execute them by our country's standards. Versus, it would be much cheaper to house the same criminal in normal prison conditions for up to 40 years of their life before you would come close to those similar costs. Now, another big problem is that despite all these issues, many people would say, but is this something we have to put up for a greater good? Does having capital punishment deter future criminals from committing this crime if they could be killed for it? And the answer is no, because in multiple surveys across the country, there has been little evidence correlating the presence of the death penalty in certain states to deterring the heinous crime rates in those states with the penalty versus those which have outlawed the penalty. And even in a study by the North Carolina Department of Justice, which had recently overturned their death penalty option, they still continued to see a decrease in violent crime in that state despite not having death as an option. So when you look at all these factors together, the idea of continuing to have the death penalty in this country becomes a very unethical issue in a justice system which must be ethical to serve the people.